Well, you were like this, and you had those tight shorts on. You had that. I was like, I need to cover Dale's junk up on this.
Hey, it's a Sandman uniform. It's basically gauze. They never thought. Why else do you think they got torn to shit when they left the city?
Yeah.
Their boots, all their boots were scuba boots.
Yeah.
That was it. They didn't need anything.
Yeah.
They're in a mall. They live in a goddamn mall the size of New York. So that should be the open right there. I was talking about why the suits got torn to shreds, and Logan the hell with saying, "Hi, it's Dale or Tony and the Bald Guy." Just start it with that.
That's right.
Just start it with that. Start it with superhero's crotch. That's how the show begins.
So, as you might be able to tell, this is just our general conversation all the time without even being the actual show. But this officially is actually episode 2 of Tony and the Bald Guy.
Imagine being stuck in a car with us for 8 hours going to the Keys.
Yes, there was a lot of interesting conversation on that car ride. That is for sure. That is for sure.
Yeah.
So, as we move through this episode 2, this is top 10 action films that millennials and younger have never seen, most likely. And once again, if you're a millennial and you have seen these films, kudos to you.
Yes, and Superhero today will be drinking Coke Zero Sugar energy drink. Tastes just like a real Coke and has all kinds of taurine and stuff in it. Keeps you going, keeps you talking fast.
And as you can tell, Superhero is also wearing his Star Trek, the original series, red shirt.
Lieutenant Commander, one of the longest living red shirts in history.
Lieutenant Commander, Superhero here.
Dwight, get in touch with me about that red shirt show. I'm interested.
Yes, there's talk. We'd love to do a red shirts
Did he
YouTube
see Red
series.
Shirts The Last Generation?
I'm not sure.
I'll have to send that to him.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyways, we're going to jump right in here. So starting out, number 10, Dollman. So Dollman is a 1991 action film with Tim Thomerson. Now, if you don't know who Tim Thomerson is, this guy has been in nearly everything over the last 3 decades. A master character actor, has been in a bazillion films. And for some reason, in the early 1990s, he did all of these really low-budget action flicks.
I remember him from Uncommon Valor.
Yes.
He was one of the chopper pilots. He was Charts.
Yeah. So this might have been able to fit into our sci-fi series, but it really does go act. Basically, this is Dirty Harry, and it's a guy from another planet, and when he comes to Earth, he's only 13 inches tall. So basically, Dirty Harry from another planet that is 13 inches tall, rampaging his way through the streets of Los Angeles, kicking serious butt.
He's basically an action figure gone wild.
Exactly. He's an action figure that is an action hero. Yes, exactly.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a completely ludicrous, absolutely out there movie, but a ton of fun and something that maybe even non-millennials have not seen.
I'm surprised this hasn't gotten the MST3K treatment.
Oh, it certainly deserves it. It's worthy in a good way. Worthy in a good way.
All MST3K movies are worthy in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming in at number 2 on our list is Action Jackson. Yes, Carl Weathers, 1988. This is basically after Carl Weathers had been doing the Rocky films. He just did Predator in '87 with Schwarzenegger. It was a chance for him to be the lead action star instead of sort of the second fiddle action guy in the action movie.
And who did he play for again?
The Raiders.
The Raiders.
Yes.
He played for the Raiders.
Yeah, sure. There's a little Sharon Stone in this film as well.
Who looks better now than she did then. She's aged like wine.
And this film had a bunch of the people from Predator actually come through and play characters in this one as well. Multiple characters. Fred Dukes is in this one. Of course, plays the police chief that has to give him a hard time.
And there's Craig T. Nelson. He's played dads in everything. Dads in horror movies. Air Force dad in Call to Glory. He has played dad more times than just about any other actor in history, would be my guess.
This is basically a...
Was he somebody's dad in this?
Nope, he's the bad guy.
I know he's a bad guy, but I mean he can't be somebody's dad.
Hey, it's true, he could. Well, the funny thing was seeing Carl Weathers doing like hand-to-hand fist fight with Craig T. Nelson. Craig T. Nelson just doesn't come across as the action guy, but he's a tall guy.
Yeah,
he's a big
boy.
guy. Yeah, he's a big guy.
Yeah. Jesse Ventura said on the Predator set, when they were running the Predator set like a boot camp, that Carl Weathers was the greatest natural athlete he'd ever met in his life. He'd get up and run 7 miles and then come back and hit the gym with them and everything like that. It was just crazy. So I'm sure he had no problem.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen it, you got to see Action
Jackson. The kids nowadays, of course, all know him as Happy Gilmore's mentor.
Well, and he was just in the new Mandalorian show on Disney Plus as well. Yeah. So now, here we go. Throw into the 70s. Walking Tall.
Walking Tall. This was based on a true story, believe it or not.
It was. Yeah. It was. Sheriff Buford T. Pusser was his name. And it's essentially a story about this sheriff who carries around a baseball bat and beats the snot out of everybody in sight that is doing anything wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know what was interesting in the 70s? You know, kind of decades seem to have their film themes. There was very much a revenge vigilante theme going on in the 70s.
Revenge fantasy, like Batman.
Yeah. Yeah. And you had, Death Wish, Walking Tall. Everything was about
the best. Where who's the guy? What was the name of the guy that made that? I think it was the director. Was an Englishman of the Death Wish movies. Was it the director or the producer? You'd know better than me. But anyways, he says to Charles Bronson, he says, "I'm going to make a movie about a man who runs around New York and shoots muggers." And Charles Bronson says, "That sounds like a wonderful idea." And he says, "Oh, you want to be in my movie?" And he says, Bronson said, "No, I want to go shoot some muggers. Would you care to join me?"
But Walking Tall is essentially one of these 70s exploitation revenge type films, just a gritty, nasty kind of action.
Oh, yeah.
Just violent.
Ruthless.
Yeah, but a lot of fun.
When the MPAA said grotesque violence is fine as long as there's no dirty words.
Yeah.
Then that's what they gave you.
And so sticking with our 1970s trucker theme here, now what's an action movie list without Chuck Norris?
That's true.
So Breaker. Another thing about the 70s is that for some reason, truck drivers were heroes.
Yep.
Like everybody that drove a truck was a hero. And they made a whole series of films. They even made a TV show, BJ and the Bear, where the truck driver was the hero. So of course you've got your dirty small town cops hassling people, and Chuck Norris's little brother ends up getting killed, I believe, and has to take revenge on this this dirty cop town.
Patrick Swayze tried to bring this back with Meatloaf. He did a film called Black Dog, which I absolutely love.
Yeah.
I think it was in the 90s.
Yeah.
He tried to bring this genre back. Yeah, the truck driver who's the hero.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was,
It's the essence of America. He's a truck driver. He keeps America going. It's morning, noon, and night. He's the everyman.
Yeah.
That's why he makes a good action hero.
And it was really just, the 70s for that truck driver thing. It was a moment in time. But, I mean, look, Breaker. Mm-hmm. Chuck Norris.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep.
Coming up next on our list, another really fun one here that we think that you're going to enjoy. Candles. Just candles. That's
Just
it.
Candles. That's it.
Just candles.
Just candles.
And a lovely
moon.
And a lovely full moon.
Is this a werewolf
candles
thing?
Candles and a full moon.
Werewolves. Okay, we got. Oh, well, there's Statue of Liberty. It's still left.
So what's an action movie without having a little post-apocalyptic stuff going on? This Rowdy Piper. And full-on 80s style, skimpily clad girls.
Yeah, one of the greatest draws in professional wrestling history, Roddy Piper.
I mean, hell comes to Frogtown.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't want to see a movie about the only virile man left on the planet being chased by all kinds of women who has to defeat extremely large mutant toads?
The problem is, Roddy didn't have to act for this because ring rats, which is what the women that professional wrestlers, basically they're groupies.
Yes.
Roddy had plenty of groupies and groupie stories and of them climbing through hotel windows trying to get at him and everything else.
There you go. There was your mutant toad.
Yeah.
But Roddy Piper. I mean, so the reason that this film is on the list and not They Live is because we're assuming you've already seen They Live.
Yeah, They Live has been played out. It's one of the greatest sci-fi movies of all time. Roddy made it that.
Yeah.
It has the longest fight scene in history, the whole put the glasses on thing.
and which was spoofed brilliantly in South Park in Cripple Fight, where the two cripple kids in South Park just duke it out.
Jimmy and
it is
Timmy.
shot for shot remake of the Fight from They Live.
Yep, Jimmy and
but
Timmy.
You've seen it. You had to have seen it. So that's why Hell Comes to Frogtown.
Now I want to see this again.
I mean, what a brilliantly fun, just pure 80s action
Roddy
film.
was taken from us way too soon.
Yeah.
Way too soon.
Yeah. Well, doing all that cocaine will do that to you.
Yeah.
And the old TriStar Pictures logo. Now, who doesn't love Iron Eagle?
Oh, I saw this in the theaters, believe it or not.
Yes.
Remember I was telling you guys about Lou Gossett Jr. and the alien makeup? Well, now you'll see him without the alien makeup on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what happened to this kid who was the main character in here. They were grooming him I mean, he's so handsome and so well built, and they were grooming him to be this big action star. Then he did a movie called Rooftops.
Yeah. Well, and this movie was such a hit.
And then he just vanished.
This movie was, and this is, I think, the exact same year that Top Gun came out. This film came out, so it was like Iron Eagle and Top Gun in the same year.
Yeah.
And the gist of this is the kid's dad is in the Air Force. He's shot down somewhere in the Middle East. Nobody wants to go rescue him. So, 18-year-old kid
who's never flown anything but a Cessna,
but he's logged lots of time in the simulator.
Yeah.
And his
Lou Gossett Jr. without the alien makeup.
Right.
And of course he's bald, so he's a good person.
Yeah. So what do? They borrow two F-16s and fly to the Middle East to get his dad back.
And believe it or not, the U.S. military had nothing to do with it.
This particular film?
Nope.
Really?
All the F-16s, all the Kafirs, they're all Israeli.
Really?
The Israelis did all the...
Because usually the Department of Defense works with Hollywood.
Not on this one. Maybe because... The same reason in Crimson Tide, the U.S. Navy refused to help because they showed a mutiny on a U.S. sub. They were showing a hijacking of two F-16s.
Right, okay.
The Israelis, so we don't know about this one. So the Israeli military stepped in to help them out.
Well, and so an interesting thing about action films from the 80s, there was this theme.
Yeah, see, they've even got the Israeli style, and they just covered up the Star of Davids with those red and yellow decals.
And an interesting thing about some films from the 80s, there was this kid fantasy of being the action hero. So we talked about Last Starfighter last week, which you're a kid that plays video games, and now you get to go save the galaxy. This particular film, you're an 18-year-old kid who gets to borrow an F-16 to go save his dad from terrorists. So there's this whole fantasy of the youth being able to do.
I want to say they made 3 or 4 more of these too, and the only constant character was Lou Gossett.
Yeah, they kept making them over and over and over
in the last one, he rounded up a bunch of World War II fighter pilots.
Yeah,
and they all got together and.
Now coming in here, a ton of fun. Schwarzenegger. The Last Action Hero.
This movie bombed
horribly.
And it did not deserve to.
No.
I think people just didn't get it.
Yeah.
Because you know what it did? You just made me think. Because every single one of these that we've mentioned, we've said that it's a fantasy. The revenge fantasy. The revenge fantasy. Well, this revealed the revenge fantasy.
Yeah.
And I think that may have been why it bombed. That's just a guess.
And the fun thing about this it was very meta before its time. Like everybody loves the meta stuff now. So it's a movie about an action hero in a movie who gets transported to the real world.
Right.
So the
character meets the actor who plays him, who is Arnold.
Right.
In our universe, even. And Arnold says, "Hey, why don't you be my stuntman or something?" And the character tells him, "You've ruined my life," and walks away. Yeah.
Well, and so the little kid has this magic ticket, and he gets transported into the film. So he is in the film, this magic film world where you can get shot and it's just a flesh wound, where things blow up and nothing.
One shot blows everything to bits.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when Schwarzenegger eventually gets brought back to the real world, it doesn't work like it works in an action movie. It's really a lot of fun.
There was a huge controversy in this movie because he takes him to a Blockbuster video in his universe to show him, see this girl working at the Blockbuster? She's way too gorgeous to work in a Blockbuster. And that caused a poop storm like you would not believe. I remember it on Entertainment Tonight and everything like that. Yeah. People were enraged by that.
Well, yeah, you couldn't get away with that today.
Right.
But in 1993, you could get away with it. And Guns N' Roses did the original sound.
I thought it was AC/DC.
Well, they probably had AC/DC music in it, but
I thought Big Gun was done by AC/DC.
Yeah, but Guns N' Roses had a song in that particular film.
You sure?
Yeah, we'll come back. We'll check on that. Throw it down here. But
oh boy,
Last Action Hero. Now, if you haven't seen this, written by Shane Black, Shane Black did all the Lethal Weapon films, Iron Man 3, a whole bunch of other stuff, and at one point was probably the most well-paid screenwriter in Hollywood. 1991 for this particular film.
He was in Predator.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, geez, you got a big that was it. Didn't they stick him there just to keep an eye on him?
He was a wild child.
He didn't have any business being in there with Jesse Ventura and Carl Weathers and Arnold, but they wanted to keep an eye on this guy, even though he was a screenwriter.
Yeah.
So they put him in a goddamn action film and just made him the radio operator.
Yeah, he was a wild man.
So they could keep an eye on him.
Yeah, so
because he was a good writer, and they didn't want him driving a Ferrari off a cliff or something.
And so you've got Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans in this, where Damon Wayans is a former NFL football player who's hooked on painkillers, basically, and Bruce Willis, who's a private eye. You got to have the private eye.
One of Halle Berry's first appearances, too. She plays Wayans. Now, Damon Wayans is one of my favorite actors of all time.
Really?
Not only is he bald, but he's made some incredible movies, his whole family has made some incredible television. He does, when we get to off-the-wall superhero movies, Blank Man.
Yeah.
Blank Man is one of the greatest, and he played another superhero character on TV called Handyman.
Oh, of course, Handyman.
That you would never get away with doing now.
No.
But Handyman was hilarious too.
Yeah.
Just a great actor.
But The Last Boy Scout, a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Just again, if you haven't seen The Last Boy Scout,
it brings revenge fantasy and football together.
I mean, come on. I know Dale, our superhero here, isn't a football guy, but I am, and Last Action Hero is a lot of fun. So now we're getting towards the top of our list a little bit here, and one of the most fun action films of all time, Red Dawn.
Oh.
So now you have to realize 1984 when this film came out.
I was in ROTC when this movie came out. And this was gospel.
Yeah.
When nowadays it's a goddamn cartoon. You look at it, it's a live action cartoon. You sit and you laugh through it. I'm surprised it didn't get the MST3K treatment. Two petty officers in my boot camp had a shouting match that almost came to blows in a class I was in over that scene you saw where the paratroopers shoot up the high school.
Really?
Because the one guy said, Soviet paratroopers would not shoot up a high school. And the other one said, what the fuck, what do you think World War II when they got to Berlin? And they almost got into a fist fight over this. People took this shit seriously.
Oh yeah, this is the height of the Cold War.
If you had to be around back then.
Yeah.
We thought every day the nukes were going to fly.
Yeah.
And
I mean, again, when you talk about a fantasy, high school kids get to basically become the new version of the Americans versus the British, the Revolutionary War, where these high school kids, their high school mascot
take on Soviet commandos and beat them.
Yeah. And
interesting thing, nowadays in a movie, if you want real Soviet equipment, it's easy to come by.
Yeah.
Because there was so much of it left over after the Cold War.
And the actors in this film.
All these vehicles were so lovingly and painstakingly made. You couldn't get it back then. They had to get vehicles and convert them into T-72s and BRDMs. And at the end of production, they were so good that the CIA actually asked them to leave the vehicles in a field somewhere. And they didn't find out till years later, but a satellite flew over and took pictures of all the vehicles so the CIA could identify actual Soviet vehicles. That's how good they were.
Yeah.
The airborne schmucks, the colors are a little off on them, but they look like actual Soviet airborne schmucks. Nowadays, you just buy a ton of Soviet airborne schmucks. They sell them cheap.
Yeah.
Back then, they got a camera into East Germany and took a picture of a guy standing there wearing one and paid him a pair of blue jeans or something to let him take the picture. But the sun was setting, so it made the colors look a little different.
Yeah.
And then they recreated all these smocks with the colors off a little bit. I need to shut up because I could just go on and on.
You could have an entire episode on Red Dawn.
The trivia about Red Dawn, like at the end where the Hind helicopters come to attack them. Nowadays, you got Hinds in Texas.
Yeah.
There's a company out there that has 2 of them that they use for movies.
Right.
Nowadays, back then, they had to be made from Puma helicopters, and they got them from this oil company. And they rented them, and they kept them too long.
Oh.
So they returned them as the Hinds, with the wings and the rockets and everything hanging off of them, and they expected to hear this, "My God, what did you do to the helicopter?" You know, and everything like that. They never heard a word.
Really?
Who was it? John Landis?
Yeah.
That did that? He never heard a word.
John Milius was screenwriter. But, I mean, Patrick Swayze.
He never heard a word. Never heard a word.
Patrick Swayze, C. Thomas Howell, Leah Thompson, Henry Dean Stanton, Powers Booth. I mean, quite a cast.
Conventions may be a thing of the past with everything going on, but Leah Thompson, the last con I was at, she had a line that went around the building.
Yeah.
Because of all the Back to the Future and the this and the Howard the Duck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's had a heck of a career.
And not to give anything away, but when we do our superhero episode, there might be a Howard the Duck on that one.
And in the DVD features, she still says this was the most fun she ever had working on a movie. She had the cowboy boots.
Yeah.
She showed them, and she said she's a country girl, so she's used to guns, and she loved shooting all the PKMs and AKs and everything like that. She just had a blast making Red Dawn.
Yeah. So, Red Dawn, and there's Red Dawn, which is Red Dawn, 1984, and there's Red Dawn 2012 Abortion that came out that I never saw and refused to see, and it bombed, of course, because...
Remakes are not always a good thing.
No, and how are you going to remake a film that it's so of its time?
Right.
Again, growing up in the Cold War era... most films are of their time, but certain ones like that, there's something that you don't get it.
We actually believed the Soviets could invade America. We didn't find out until decades later they never had the logistic ability to do it.
Yeah.
They had a huge army, but you had to be landlocked to them.
Yeah.
We were terrified of these people. And we didn't realize they were just as terrified of us after the war ended. They said they'd find our subs and everything by looking for our planes that were looking for their subs. Yeah. They were just as terrified of us.
And coming in number 1 on the list here, one of the most ridiculous action films of all time, Stone Cold, starring Brian Bosworth. And again, when you speak of its time, most people today probably don't really know who Brian Bosworth is. Maybe he's the guy from the Dr. Pepper college football commercials. But Brian Bosworth, even if you were not a football fan in the 80s, was one of the most outlandish personalities in the country at that time.
Yeah.
And so this whole sort of rebel, lunatic attitude that he had, he played for just a little short stint for the Seahawks.
You would know better than I did. Didn't he get a huge contract and a huge amount of money to not do a goddamn thing?
Well, he played 3 seasons for the Seahawks. Okay. He actually was really good, but he blew out his shoulder and just wasn't able to keep playing. And everybody remembers the one play where he got completely trucked by Bo Jackson, but it was not indicative of how good of a player he actually was. And one of the best college players of all time.
I actually had a shotgun named after this guy.
But all of that aside, Stone Cold is one of the most ludicrous action films that you'll see.
Yeah, and it's ludicrous, to say the least.
Absolutely.
His brother's a great actor, too. You just hardly ever see him. Don Swayze? He's actually a bigger guy, too. He plays a lot of, like, demented hillbillies and stuff like that. Yeah, Don. And Don did Pat's voice when Pat was Peter's guardian angel on Family Guy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was Don Swayze that did his voice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Stone Cold, tops on our list, and we're just chatting a little bit here about Patrick Swayze, actually.
Yeah. Patrick Swayze did all of his own stunts, all of his own flying, even all of his own skydiving. That guy was a serious badass.
And he wasn't a big guy.
Maybe you should have mentioned Steel Dawn or Roadhouse.
Yeah.
Roadhouse.
So many films. And again, I feel like millennials have seen those films.
Steel Dawn? Really?
Maybe not Steel Dawn, but Roadhouse.
Roadhouse, Roadhouse.
It
got the MST3K treatment.
Yeah.
But Steel Dawn, that's another post-apocalyptic, like the one with the Dollman.
Dollman, yeah. There are so many films to choose from. It's hard to come up with just this top 10.
Right.
So
red shirts are your actual heroes. Though.
Yeah, as we move forward, we're gonna do we did sci-fi and we've done action films here, but we're gonna start breaking it down even further. We're gonna do war films, we'll do martial arts films, we'll do time travel films.
I'm not dressing up as an SS general for war films. Sorry, that will come back to haunt me.
Not gonna ask you to do that.
Not gonna do that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll dress up as GI Robot. Or
because
something
when you talk about action films people haven't seen, you could obviously dig into blaxploitation films from the 70s, but so many of those were really martial arts films. A lot of them were not Dolomite, but martial.
Yeah. But that was a martial arts film. What you talking about, man? And he misses him by a mile, and the guy still goes, oh, yeah.
Well, and I feel like because of the Netflix film, everybody's gone out and seen the original Dolomite.
Good point.
So, not having that on here. So, but anyways, we could drill down and do a million things. If there's something particular, a list that you'd like us to do that we haven't done, that we're gonna do, let us know.
Right.
Give us some suggestions.
Right.
But we're gonna break this down. We'll do, like I said, we'll do martial arts films, we'll do war films, we'll do time travel movies.
I'd like that one.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. So we're just gonna kind of break it down to a whole bunch of other stuff. We hope you enjoyed episode 2 here of Tony and the Ball Guy, top 10 action films that millennials have never seen. And let us know what you think. Yeah. Subscribe.
Dwight Saniak, get in touch with me about the Red Shirt Show.
And we're going to do an entire Star Trek episode soon as well.
Really? Well, there's plenty of movies. What can Star Trek fans say that Star Wars fans can't?
I don't know.
At least we don't hate 6 of our 9 movies.
We'll see you next time.